Everyone, my name is Uma Blandon.
My name is Angelina Cabrera.
My name is Kate Noel.
And I'm Xiaoyu Zhen. And here we're presenting our proposal for Ocklawaha River manatee and fish habitat restoration. And our proposal is a vision for a restored river. And we're focusing on telling the story from three aspects: economic, recreational, and wildlife.
And so we took those kind of three concepts and turned them into three main goals, which were to provide a diverse range of recreational opportunities such as boating, kayaking, fishing, etc. We also want to support local economies that can benefit from this increased tourism and job opportunities. And lastly, we want to conserve and protect our important Florida wildlife species like the manatees and rare and migratory fish, as well as their unique habitats and migratory needs. So from these three goals, and with Margaret's guidance, we can frame our project by 5 big ideas, which are each informed by precedent studies and current conditions. And so our first big idea is to provide essential warm water refuges for the 500 plus manatees that could use the Ocklawaha River during the winter months after restoration.
So a little bit about the Florida manatee, which we are trying to conserve. They're herbivores and feed on a variety of submerged, emergent, and floating plants. During the year, manatees live in both fresh and salt water, preferring calm rivers, springs, estuaries, bays, and canals found throughout Florida. During winter months, manatees seek refuge in Florida's natural springs. Loss of warm water habitat is a serious long-term threat to these manatees.
And so one of our precedent studies was Blue Springs State Park, which is unique because visitors can view the manatees from a boardwalk that stretches about 1/3 of a mile from the St. Johns River to the head spring. And so this boardwalk provides a great opportunity to safely observe manatees. You can even watch mothers nursing their calves, all without influencing the manatees' natural behavior or bothering them. And so the number of manatees visiting this park specifically has grown a lot, from about 36 animals in the 1970s when research began to over 500 animals today.
Informed by this study, we looked at potential habitats for manatees that can be performed as winter refuge for the species. We identify all the springs that have been lost due to the Rodman Dam, which is marked here by the gray circles. We'll also be expecting the return of those springs after the proposed dam removal. Therefore, after consulting our manatee scientist, Monica Ross, we identified several hotspots that manatees currently hang out. And with the restored Ocklawaha River, those spots can be very crucial in becoming manatee refuge during the winter.
So our second big idea was to generate economic benefits through increased visitation to Silver Springs and the recovered springs in the Ocklawaha. And so we examined the kind of current economic situation with Silver Springs. And so Silver Springs once attracted over 1 million visitors per year, but today that number has decreased dramatically to about 250,000 visitors annually. And so according to boat drivers that have worked at the springs for decades, the glass bottom boat tour was actually shortened from an hour to 30 minutes during the 1980s because of this degradation of the springs and the loss of fish and wildlife that were available for viewing. And so this was in part due to the construction of the Rodman Dam, which led to the departure of these migratory fish species and diminished diversity of aquatic and terrestrial species. And a motel owner was quoted at a public hearing that he had experienced guests booking a week at his motel due to these beautiful online historic photos of the springs, but that these people would end up canceling after a day or two because their expectations were not met. A visual inspection of the East State Road 40 in these areas around the state park reveal kind of the heavy toll that declining tourism has taken on local businesses. And so because of this, in 2017, Marion County created a Silver Springs community redevelopment area to revive the Silver Springs area. And the key focus would be to encourage job generating investments as part of the redevelopment initiative, while at the same time enhancing the environmental quality of the area and reviving the economy of this area has to include restoring not only Silver Springs, but also the Ocklawaha River. And as you can see in this table, the average visitation across 5 rural springs-based parks was about 94,000 visitors, with about 8.3 million in economic impact to their regions. So to make a more conservative estimate, possibly more relevant to the new Ocklawaha River Spring sites in the early years of their future existence, we can see that the average for the 3 less visited springs-based state parks would be about 16,000 visitors per year, with 1.5 million in economic impact and supporting 66 local jobs. So therefore, partial restoration could lead to a recovered spring system in the Ocklawaha River and Silver Springs, which in turn could bring in manatees seeking warm water refuges, which would all work together to bring in more visitors, more revenue, and more jobs to the area and the Silver Springs CRA.
Being informed by those numbers, we want to discover the most potential sightseeing for the manatees, and it's marked here by the red dots. However, all those dots are within the property conservation lands, which is very important information for us as it ensures our ability to actually provide a positive interventions for manatee seeing during the winter. Also, that means economic benefits by creating healthy relationship between the visitors from the land and the manatees in the water.
And then our third big idea would be to help make Silver Springs the most popular interior manatee viewing area in Florida.
Here we look at the case study of the Crystal River, which is one of the biggest manatee viewing river in Florida, I would say. And people are allowed to view and swim with manatees with the guidelines, which means that you can get into the river, but you cannot really touch them or interact with them physically. And a lot of the areas, almost about 40 acres during the winter, are actually off limits to human activities. And those are the winter refuges for the manatee. And this is very informative for us, and also how they implement the signage is also very informative. So we're looking at here that the boat ramps that are existing on the river, because we're expecting the river, after the river get restored, the waterway might be a little bit more narrow and cause more danger from the boat to the manatees. And therefore, we wanted to implement signage that are similar to Crystal River in order to protect manatee habitats, especially during the winter. Therefore, it's very important for us to implement educational signage as well to inform the visitors to the river and the boat users. So here are the boat ramps and fishing sweet spots that we're considering implementing signage.
This leads us to our fourth goal, which is to help restore the Silver Springs ecosystem. Florida Springs Director Bob Knight says Silver Springs can't fully be restored without a free-flowing Ocklawaha River. Fish declined by more than 90% following the dam closure in 1968. A restored Silver Springs will include 10 times more fish and add up to 500 more manatees to the area. This leads us to our first case study on the Elwha River Dam, which is located in the Olympic Peninsula in Washington. In 2011, government authorized the removal of this dam to restore the altered ecosystems and native fisheries. This opened up over 70 miles of spawning habitat for fish, which used to only be 5 miles that they used. Scientists teamed up with natives from the Clam tribe to implement revegetation projects to restore several hundred acres of former reservoirs. Some of their goals were to minimize the presence of invasive species, restore natural ecosystem processes, reestablish native forest, and replant former lake beds. Revegetating this area has facilitated numerous ecosystem benefits, including preventing erosion, improving soil quality, and creating habitat for pollinators and other organisms. The ongoing monitoring effects indicate that this area is experiencing the most successful return rates of the 5 Pacific salmon species, even seeing some species that haven't been around for over 100 years.
So, increased water levels due to the Rodman Dam have led to habitat loss, resulting in rare and imperiled fish species within the Ocklawaha River system. These include dusky shiner, blue nose shiner, which is considered protected, southern tasseled darter, which is also considered protected, snail bullhead, which is considered vulnerable, mud sunfish, band pygmy sunfish, and black-banded sunfish, which is also considered protected. Currently, these species live in fragmented colonies, threatening their population for extinction. Restoration of the river will steady these fish populations as well as increase overall ecological function of the river system. So this map shows current habitat data for some of these rare and imperiled fish species. It shows black-banded sunfish fragmented to the northwest of the river and southeast, snail bullheads situated along the river, blue nose shiner fragmented to the southeast and southern tussled darter along the upper portion of the Ocklawaha River. This brings us to our fifth and final big idea, which is to return historic migratory fish to the Ocklawaha River and Silver Springs. This will ultimately improve habitat, visitor experience, and fishing opportunities.
This is the case study on the Edwards Dam removal, and this one is located in Maine. This dam was removed in 1999 after being there for over 100 years. This brought a lot of recreational and economic benefits to the area. There was a large increase in boaters and anglers. Riverbanks have fully regenerated and created new shoreline habitat, which increases the diversity throughout the area. Natural water levels have allowed rapids and gravel bar islands of the Kennebec to establish themselves, which are a critical habitat for a lot of the wildlife. And river communities have been restoring their downtown riverfronts. And so some of the environmental benefits include the increasing of the water quality and the migratory fish returning, which the important ones to look at, which are in our system, are the American shad, the striped bass, and the American eel.
There are 69 species of fish that have been documented in the Silver Springs, Silver River, and the upper, middle, and lower Ocklawaha River. Of these, 10 are native migratory species. Striped bass, American and hickory shad, and hog choker are all anadromous species, living as adults in the ocean and migrating to freshwater habitats to spawn. The striped bass is a notable mention because it is a large fish, reaching lengths of up to 5 feet, weighing in at over 80 pounds, and living for 30 years. American eel and striped mullet are catadromous fish species, living in freshwater as adults and migrating to the ocean to spawn. Noteworthy here is the American eel, as it is a significant source of food for fish, mammals, turtles, and birds. During their spawning season, they migrate specifically to the Sargasso Sea, where a single female can release more than 2 million eggs. Channel catfish and white catfish migrate within the river systems and their tributaries to spawn, while needlefish and southern flounder migrate from offshore to inshore habitats or vice versa to spawn, but can sometimes enter freshwater systems. Channel catfish pose a high economic value as they are considered one of the most delectable freshwater fish, having sweet, white, tender meat when harvested from clean water systems. Most of these migratory fish are rare or absent from the Ocklawaha River because the dam blocks off their spawning migration. This map shows current conditions where blockage is evident at the dam, inhibiting American eel from efficiently reaching the Atlantic Ocean to spawn, and striped bass, American and hickory shad, and hog choker from effectively reaching the Ocklawaha River to spawn. The white catfish is also prevented from entering the Okawaha River from St. John's River. This map shows how a restored river system can open up migration patterns for these native migratory fish, allowing them to spawn freely within their natural spawning grounds, ultimately increasing species biodiversity, improving habitat quality, and increasing recreation opportunities like fishing, boating, snorkeling in the Okawaha River.
So the current state of the Ocklawaha River is affecting native habitat for important species and migration patterns. With removal of the dam and restoration of the habitat, we hope to bring back fish species and protect important manatee refuge spots in the Ocklawaha River, all while increasing economic revenue, wildlife habitat, and recreational opportunities. So this is just an image of what we envision after everything has gone through. Thank you, guys.